Spider-Man is reportedly racing toward the $2 billion mark, while Supergirl finished its theatrical run at just $126 million worldwide. And that massive gap has created a very uncomfortable situation for DC Studios. Because while Marvel and Sony are celebrating one of the biggest superhero successes in recent memory, people are once again looking back at Supergirl and asking a very simple question. If audiences are supposedly tired of superhero movies, then why are they showing up in massive numbers for Spider-Man? Now, Millie Alcock has an answer, and she is asking fans to stop comparing the two movies, but her explanation has already sparked another wave of criticism. Because instead of discussing the script, the storytelling, the audience reaction, or why Spider-Man connected with so many people, the conversation has once again shifted towards sexism, misogyny, fandom culture, and supposedly unfair comparisons. And that is exactly where this story gets interesting. As of August 11th, 2026, the superhero box office conversation is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. On one side, you have Spider-Man: Brand New Day, which has reportedly surged to around $1.7 billion worldwide and continues moving toward the $2 billion milestone. On the other side, you have Supergirl, which ended its theatrical run at approximately $126 million worldwide. That contrast is enormous, and naturally, fans and commentators are going to compare the two. That's what happens when two major superhero projects arrive in the same era and one becomes a massive commercial success while the other struggles to find an audience. But according to actress Millie Alcock, fans shouldn't be doing that, and her comments have now placed her directly in the middle of a much larger debate about what actually caused Supergirl to underperform. According to comments attributed to Alcock, she believes audiences should stop obsessing over box office numbers and comparing movies based purely on their financial results. Her argument is essentially that a movie making more money doesn't automatically make it a better movie. And technically, that's a fair point. Box office revenue alone cannot determine the artistic quality of a film. There are critically acclaimed movies that made relatively little money, and there are enormously successful blockbusters that receive plenty of criticism. But that's not really what the current debate is about. The bigger question is why audiences chose one superhero movie over another, and that's where the conversation becomes much more complicated. Alcock also argued that Supergirl didn't receive what she considered a fair opportunity because the cast and crew had to deal with what she described as sexist and misogynistic criticism throughout the promotional campaign. She believes that the negativity surrounding the movie was heavily influenced by toxic elements within fandom culture. And this isn't the first time we've heard that argument. James Gunn has made similar points while defending the project, and other people connected to Supergirl have also spoken about online criticism and the pressure surrounding the movie. But here's the problem critics have with that explanation. It doesn't answer why Spider-Man succeeded. Spider-Man isn't operating in some completely different universe where audiences suddenly became interested in superheroes again. It's still a superhero movie. It's still part of a franchise that has existed for years. And, importantly, Spider-Man. Brand New Day also features multiple female characters and actresses. So the existence of strong female characters clearly isn't enough by itself to explain why one movie succeeds while another struggles. This is why many people believe the real issue needs to be examined somewhere else. The story, the screenplay, the pacing, the characters, and most importantly, whether audiences actually connected with what they were watching. Alcock went on to argue that Supergirl was designed to provide an important role model for women and girls, and that this mission was more important to the filmmakers than simply chasing box office numbers. She also suggested that female characters in superhero movies are often pushed into supporting roles rather than being positioned as the central hero. Again, that's a legitimate discussion to have. But audiences can agree with the idea of strong female protagonists while still deciding that they don't like a particular movie. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. A viewer can support female-led superhero stories and still criticize the execution of one specific film. And that's the distinction that seems to be getting lost in this debate. Because when a movie performs badly, audiences are naturally going to examine what went wrong. That's not automatically sexism. That's not automatically misogyny. And it's certainly not proof that an entire fandom is toxic. Sometimes audiences simply don't like the movie. And sometimes the audience tells Hollywood exactly what isn't working. That's why Alcock's comments about ignoring fans have also generated criticism. She suggested that actors and filmmakers need to focus on their own creative vision instead of allowing fan demands to dictate their decisions. And there is some truth to that. Filmmakers shouldn't allow every social media comment to control an entire production. But there's a major difference between ignoring random internet noise and listening to legitimate audience feedback. And Spider-Man provides an interesting example of that distinction. Tom Holland and the people behind Brand New Day have discussed the importance of test audiences and the process of evaluating different versions of a movie. The basic idea is simple. You make the movie. You show it to people. You discover what isn't working. Then you go back and make changes. Scenes can be removed. New material can be added. Pacing can be adjusted. Storylines can be reworked. And if those changes make the movie better, the audience ultimately benefits. That's not necessarily filmmakers surrendering their creative vision. That's filmmaking. And if Spider-Man is indeed connecting with audiences at the level its box office suggests, then it's worth asking whether that willingness to evaluate audience reactions played some role in the final result. Meanwhile, Supergirl's defenders continue pointing toward another theory, the idea of a silent majority. The argument is that there are supposedly many people who enjoyed Supergirl but don't want to defend it publicly because they're afraid of being mocked or attacked online. It's certainly possible that some people enjoyed the movie and simply aren't vocal about it, but the existence of a silent audience is extremely difficult to measure. You can't point to people who aren't speaking and use their silence as proof that they loved a movie. At the end of the day, studios have measurable indicators. Ticket sales are measurable. Audience ratings are measurable. Digital purchases can be measured. Streaming performance can be measured, and word of mouth eventually shows up in the numbers. That's why the comparison with Spider-Man isn't going away simply because people ask fans to stop making it. The numbers themselves are what created the comparison in the first place. And when one movie approaches $2 billion while another finishes around $126 million, people are naturally going to ask what created such a massive difference. That doesn't automatically mean Spider-Man is a masterpiece. It doesn't automatically mean Supergirl is the worst superhero movie ever made. But it does mean something about the two films connected very differently with the mainstream audience. And that's the part of this debate that deserves the most attention. Because blaming everything on toxic fandom doesn't explain why casual moviegoers didn't turn out in the numbers Warner Brothers and DC Studios needed. Most people who skip a superhero movie aren't spending their entire day arguing about it on social media. They're ordinary moviegoers deciding what they're willing to spend their money on. And when those people choose one movie over another, Hollywood has to pay attention. As for Millie Alcock's career, that's a completely different question. One box office disappointment isn't necessarily going to destroy an actor's career. Alcock is still a young performer, and a single controversial movie doesn't define someone's entire future in Hollywood. If anything, her career will probably depend much more on what she chooses to do next, but continuing to publicly frame every criticism of Supergirl as sexism or misogyny could create another problem. It can make audiences feel as though their criticism isn't being taken seriously. And that may be the biggest lesson coming out of this entire situation. People don't necessarily need Hollywood to agree with them. They simply want their opinions to be acknowledged. If audiences didn't connect with the screenplay, explain why the screenplay worked. If the pacing was criticized, explain the creative choices. If the ending divided viewers, defend the ending. If the marketing failed, analyze what went wrong. Those conversations are much more productive than simply telling millions of people that they misunderstood the movie. Because at the end of the day, Spider-Man's success doesn't prove that every superhero movie should make $2 billion. But it does make one argument much harder to defend, that audiences have simply stopped caring about superhero movies. Clearly, they haven't. They're still showing up. They're still spending their money. They're still breaking box office records when a movie gives them a reason to care. So perhaps the real problem isn't superhero fatigue, after all. Perhaps audiences are simply becoming more selective about which superhero movies deserve their time and money. And if that's the lesson Hollywood takes from the completely different performances of Spider-Man and Supergirl, then this entire controversy could end up being much bigger than either movie. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you agree with Millie Alcock that fans should stop comparing Supergirl with Spider-Man? Or do you think box office performance and audience reaction are completely fair things to discuss when comparing two major superhero films? Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to The Woke Watch for more Hollywood and entertainment coverage. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.